In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the rear fuel tank on this Ford F-450. Let's get started. Now with the vehicle safely supported, of course if you're not working on a lift and you're on the ground, you may not need this exact setup, but I'm using a transmission jack with a fuel tank attachment. I want to support this shield before I go any further so I can safely unbolt it. There we go, put a little bit of pressure on it. And now let's unbolt the 4 bolts holding this on. On the front end of the tank where the differential is, you'll see 2 15mm bolts. One is over here. Let's remove this one first. It's a good idea to spray them with rust penetrant because they're usually rusty out in the open here. Our retainer nut broke on the top, so I put some locking pliers on it, and I'm gonna unthread it. There we go. Take that bolt out. You can leave this mounting nut up there. Take the pliers off. All right, let's move to the other side. Let's go for the second one now. This one came out a lot easier. Now from the back of the tank where the rear bumper is, let's go, if you follow these lines right here, it'll be right at the top of it, up against the rear bumper. Another 15mm bolt. Okay, there's that. Let's move to the other side. Let's go for the second one now. Take that bolt out. Now let's take the hose clamp off for the filler neck. Use an 8mm socket or whatever else your hose clamp is. Loosen it up. Once you loosen this up enough, you should be able to get this out of our way. There we go. All right, so let's grab a pry bar, pry the hose off. Be gentle, try not to completely tear it. All right, there's one. Push it up above. Now let's get the hose clamp for that second one, the smaller hose. Once you loosen it up enough, hopefully you'll be able to grab it, spin it around so you can get to it a little bit better. And with this out of the way, let's pry this one. All right, here we go. All right, push that up. We have a ground wire here. For us, it's broken. As you can see, this was the connector. For you, it hopefully still is connected, and just disconnect it from the tank. Now let's very slowly lower the tank. Keep in mind the fuel pump is still connected up top, plumbed up, so we can't go all the way down. Go slow. If it starts getting hung up on stuff, make sure you find out what it is and either move this around, pry it, just make sure it's not getting hung up on anything. Let's pop the connector off the frame here. This is for the fuel pump. You don't have to remove it, I guess, but it helps to disconnect this once it's popped off. This just broke a little bit, but that's okay. We can fix that later. Now you can flip it over and look at the tab so you can actually press it and wiggle this out. All right, so that's disconnected. If you follow this up right here, we need to remove it from this retainer as well as those hoses, but looks like those already came off. All right, there we go. So leave that over there. And then if you reach behind the frame, pull this wire off, and then we need to pop these 2 lines off of the fuel pump. To do this, we'll have to grab some pliers. It's got 2 clips, one on top, one on the bottom. Squeeze those in, and the line should pop off. There's one. Now we have to move on to this other one. Now pull this line out, but be careful because fuel will come out of here. Set that over here. I have some pads to absorb everything. Looks like not a whole lot came out. That's okay. Now, let's slowly lower the fuel tank. Now with the tank lowered, let's remove the mounting nuts that hold the straps over the top of it. 18mm socket. Now pull the straps up. And they are hooked at the back. Just want to make sure they come off the tank here. Underneath them, right here, you'll see these pads. Save these pads. We'll have to transfer them to the new tank. All this does is it provides a cushion in between the strap and the tank so that it doesn't rub right into the tank. Now, I know here it sits right up against it, but there's also the protective rubber coating. But regardless, save these pads. From the back side, you can see where the strap goes through the lower shield. Flip it up, pull it through, and you can remove it. Let's do the same to the other one. Set these aside. Now with a helper, remove the tank from this shield. So now with this separated, we have the new tank right next to it and we're ready to swap the fuel pump over. I cleaned off everything the best I could. As you can see, this tank is in extremely poor condition, but it's important to have as little debris as possible here. I mean, hopefully yours doesn't have a bunch of holes in it. But you don't want debris getting in the fuel, so you can actually reuse what's in here if you wish to do so. Use your 8mm socket and take off all the bolts that hold this pickup tube in. It's actually not a pump. Just break them free. Hopefully yours aren't in too poor of condition. For us, because the diesel actually seeped through the holes in the tank, it kept these bolts from rotting away. So in a way, it is good, but you know, it's also not good. So get all these off. Now, the new tank does come with a new gasket to put under here, as well as new hardware. So if you need new hardware, there are new bolts provided. You can either reuse these or use the new ones. One last bolt over here. Now you can pull this up. Now before we install the pump in the new tank and put a new gasket on it, I want to clean off all this debris that's here. To start, I'm just going to take a rag, try to wipe as much of it off as you can see. It's all going to most likely wipe off because this isn't the cap here that's actually rusty. It's dirt, and basically it transferred over from the tank side. So once I wipe it off like that, I'm going to flip the rag to a little bit cleaner of a side and spray it a little bit of brake parts cleaner just to rinse it off. Having the surface clean prevents the fuel from being potentially contaminated once you put this over the brand new tank. All right, let's put this on the tank. Now in the new tank, you'll see that there's a little cutout on one side of it. The new gasket will have the same. There's only one cutout on each, and that's the only way that these line up because the holes are offset. So if you put it a different way, the holes won't line up. You also want to make sure that these little pins that are built into the rubber aim up. These lock into the pickup tube assembly so that everything can lock in properly. Put this down. Try not to get a bunch of debris in here. Looks like the gasket moved. Center it up. And now, try to line everything up the way it was. Just like that. Okay. And now, like I mentioned earlier, you can either use the new bolts or reuse your old ones. I'm just going to reuse my old ones since they're in good condition, just a little bit dirty, but they're going to get dirty again being installed on here. So I'm going to thread those in, and we're gonna snug them up. When I tighten them, you'll notice that I go in a cross pattern, and that's because I'm dealing with a rubber gasket here. And the rubber gasket needs to be tightened evenly so it can seal properly. Otherwise, it might end up either kinked or not sealed up on one side, and hopefully that's not the case, but usually you don't know until after you're done. So I'm going to go here and then across and so on. And I'm just snugging them, so after they get pretty much bottomed out, I'm going to go another quarter turn just to squish that rubber a little bit. And now that I've gone once around the whole assembly here, I'm going to go again in a circle this time just to make sure they're all tightened evenly, because the rubber gasket will squish and then you end up with a couple loose bolts, and that would not be good. If you wanted to, you could torque these to 89 inch-pounds. That is technically the torque for them. I'm going to check them one more time. There you have it. Now for this, we're going to have to twist gently. Don't break it off. Once you feel it release right about here, you're going to want to pry upwards on it. Sometimes shimmying it back and forth can help. Basically, it's a twist and lock type thing, but they're usually stuck pretty good in here. Go slow. That way you don't break anything. There we go. As you can see, it's definitely very stuck on here. So I'm going to clean this. I don't want to put this in the new tank. This is all right, it's clean, but this area needs to seal up, especially this O-ring. You can replace it if needed. Usually they're okay to be reused as long as they're not dry rotted and cracked and in poor condition. This one's all right, just dirty, so I'll wipe it off and we'll put it in the new tank. With it clean, slide it into the new tank and lock it into position. Now get a helper and put the fuel tank back onto the shield. I transfer the fuel to this tank. Now, however you want to do that is your choice. If you don't have much fuel left in here and it's contaminated, I would just recycle it and get new fuel for this tank. Now to strap it down, I have these pads that came off of the old one. Save them if you can, because they do protect the tank from the strap digging into it. Place these right around the middle here. There are two cutouts where the straps go. Put these down, take the straps, slide them down, and when it comes to putting them in position, you want to slide them through these openings here. Once they're through, pull them up and lock them in. We'll worry about the other side in a little bit. We'll do these one side at a time, one strap at a time. Once they're both locked in on this side, flip the tank around, and you can put these bolts, or studs I guess they are, through the holes on here. If you need to clean up these threads, go ahead. A lot of times they do get rusty. If you can get one of them started, that usually helps bring everything down. So I'm going to snug this one up a little bit. Okay, with this halfway threaded on, let's try to get the other one lined up. Hopefully now that the tank is being pulled down, yep, that one lines up barely, just one thread, but that's enough for me to get the nut to grab on, and I can take it from here and tighten it up. Now that I know that they're both threading on smoothly, I'm just going to grab my air impact and make sure they're bottomed out nice and snug. Tighten them up. And the other one. Perfect. Before we put the tank up, I want to clean up the filler neck hoses just on the end here, because as you can see, there's quite a bit of debris, corrosion, rust buildup from the old tank. I'm going to take a rag and carefully scrape it all out. If you wanted to, you can blow air through the other side and it should come out this side. Obviously, it's not always the case. You shouldn't always need to do this, but it's a good idea. It doesn't have to be perfect, but the better you get it, the less debris could make it into the tank. So try to clean it off the best you can. Like I said, it's never going to look brand new unless you replace the hose. I'm going to put a little bit of silicone paste on it, just a tiny amount, so it can slide on when the fuel tank gets put back in. You don't want this mixing with the fuel, but I do want it to slide on easily. And of course, if your hose clamps are in poor condition, replace them. Now let's bring the tank back up. Now let's bring the tank up into position. Try to line it up the best you can. Don't go all the way up, because now we're going to connect the fuel lines. Now grab the fuel lines, reconnect them. They have these clips that we had to unlock when we disconnected them, so make sure that when you put them back, they click into place. All right, now those are both on. Let's loop the electrical connector up and over this frame rail with the fuel tank raised up a little bit more. Let's re-secure these lines onto their retainers at the top here. It's important that they don't flop around. Plug in the connector for the sending unit, the level sensor. Make sure that's secured. And I had a little spot in the frame here. Secure that so it doesn't get caught. Make sure this brake hose goes in through the slot on this shield. I can see that my bolt holes are basically lined up perfectly, so let's continue bringing this tank up until these two meet. And at the same time, we're going to have to focus on the filler neck to get that back in. So let's get the filler neck connected. It's easier to do this lower or the smaller hose first. Try and pry it away and then slide it over the fuel tank. Wiggle it till it falls into place. Before I tighten it, I'm going to get this larger hose reconnected. Make sure these are fully seated. In order to do that, I'm going to have to raise the tank up a little more. All right. Bottom these out completely. Let's snug these up. There we go. Right about there. As long as you can't twist this hose and pull it off, you're good to go. And let's do the same to this bigger one. Okay, those are both nice and tight. Let's bring the tank all the way up. All right, now let's keep going up the rest of the way. All right, that threads on smoothly. Just gonna bring it up as much as I can by hand, right about there. I'm gonna grab my ratchet, give it a couple turns. That way I know it's seated and secured. And then I'll move on to the other one before I tighten them. There we go. That one starts very nicely also, so that's good. I'm not going to fully tighten these. I'm going to get them close, and once the two rear bolts are in, that's when I'm going to completely tighten these down, just in case the tank or the shield needs to still move around a little bit. Now let's put the rear bolt in. There we go. Thread it on. That's as far as I can go by hand, so let's put the other one in, and I'll tighten them all. I have to hold my mounting nut up top because it actually broke off of its retaining cage. Now that they're all in, let's tighten up all the bolts. Unfortunately, I have to hold the top of mine with a wrench because the retainer is broken. The torque for these is only 16 foot-pounds, so I'm going to make them nice and tight with the air gun, and then we're going to come back and torque them, but I'm saying that so that you don't think they have to be crazy tight. All right, that's one. And the other one. Now let's do the other two. And once again, if you wanted to torque them, 16 foot-pounds is the torque. So let's grab the torque wrench. That's one, two, and let's do the other ones really quick. All right, they're all torqued. Now remove your support. Now we have to prime the fuel system. Put the key in the ignition, turn it to the on position. That's 2 clicks. Leave it here. The fuel pump will do its thing. You can hear the fuel pump running if you listen closely. That just shut off. I'm going to turn it back off and do it again. I'm going to do it as many times as it takes until there is no air in the system. I do not want to get air in the high pressure system. I'll let the low pressure pump take care of all the priming. It's already sounding better, but I'm going to do this 3 to 4 times in total. And when you hear the buzzing stop, that's when the fuel pump is going to stop running, so that's where I'm going to shut it off and turn it back on. This is a very clean run, no air. Shut it off, try one more time, and then you should be clear to start it.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.